Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it's time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time against the Sacramento Kings. This is Game 2 of their West Coast road trip. I guess I shouldn't fully say West Coast road trip because it ends in Denver and there's no body of water next to it. But I will say the next two games, the Knicks will be playing in the state of California, and they head to Northern California to play this Kings team that I'm a bit confused by from the research. They're 38-27 coming into this game, only a half game worse than the Knicks. And you know, it's literally one in the win column. So they're the same number of losses this season. They sit at sixth place in the Western Conference, which the Knicks currently being the 4 seed, or I guess, yeah, technically the 4 seed. It's interesting to see what's different about the Kings this year compared to last year. It seems, from my perspective, just a little bit of research, that the only real big thing that's different is the NBA. Like the Western Conference is different this year, that they may potentially be going up against a better level of competition. And nothing screams that more than the offensive rating. That last year was the best in NBA history. It was about 118. It's about 117 this year, so only a point worse, and they're 8th in offensive rating this year. So we'll see if that's the only thing that's different about the Kings this year. And joining me to talk about the Kings at an expert perspective and with the expert information, he is from the Kings Pulse and does AM radio. He does radio in Sacramento as well. Friend of the pod, Mr. Brenden Nunes. Brenden, how you doing, my man?
Doing good, Andrew. Appreciate you having me on, man.
I appreciate you making the time. Obviously, we're doing this as best as convenient for someone on the West Coast as possible. Recording around 1:30 Eastern.
So apologies for that.
No. So here's the real behind the scenes. I'm the one that actually had to push this a whole day. So that's why this didn't drop on Saturday morning. I was telling you before, Brenden, as you heard in the intro, I am so confused by this Kings team. And you know, I mentioned that the offensive rating is they were first and like a revelation. Mike Brown wins Coach of the Year last year. They're 8th this year, but not significantly worse offensively. They're actually a little better defensively this year. They're 20th in defensive rating this year. But the league, it seems, from my perspective, just there's a Clippers this year. There's a Thunder team that took a leap. There's a Timberwolves team that took a leap, and obviously the Suns put together what they put together, and they're like behind you guys in the standings. Like the Pelicans are healthy for a year. Am I reading that right? That from the Kings fans' perspective, this has largely been the exact same team, but the Western Conference got better.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I can't think of another team, and I haven't sat down and done the exercise, but the Kings brought back their top 7-8 guys from last season, so it's really hard to look very different. I would say the major developments are De'Aaron Fox has turned into a pretty good 3-point shooter. This year, he's taken 7.5 a game and he's knocked down 36.4%. And that's been more of a slump recently. He started really hot from there, but the volume is definitely a notable difference. And you see the confidence there as well. And the other thing would be Keegan Murray's defense. He's getting put on a lot of guards. Wouldn't surprise me if maybe he even got some run on Jalen Brunson in this matchup, done well against guys like Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards. So I think that's been a big internal development for both of those guys, but largely been a lot of pretty much the same, to be honest. I think you're pretty spot on with your evaluation.
So even more so, the starting five for those the Knicks fans that don't know, it's De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, Keegan Murray, as you mentioned, Kevin Huerter, and Harrison Barnes. Last year, they were at a net rating of around 3, and then the bench was these insane lineups, whether it was Monk coming in for Huerter or Davion Mitchell in for Fox, and it's like +10, +13, limited possessions, but that's what a bench unit is. It's limited possessions, right? And it seems like the bench, whatever unit was being put together, there was always like this boost coming in. And that seems to have leveled off, that it's a starting 5 that's still pretty consistent around +5 this year. And there's no insane bench unit. You tell me the vibes in Sacramento, like, has this been a disappointing year, even though it's been largely the same output as last year?
Yeah, I would say from a fan base perspective, it definitely has been. But I think that, you know, in typical fandom fashion, it's hard to accept that growth is not linear always. And I think that this is, in a way, these minor developments that I talk about of Fox and Keegan Murray are big for long term, and they're waiting to take their next big swing. So like long term roster construction in view of this team, I think is fine, but it is one of those seasons where you're kind of just waiting and repeating what you did before. And there is a big emphasis on physicality this season that they're trying to up, and recently back-to-back wins over Milwaukee and then the Lakers. They're probably coming off their best 2 straight games of the season so far this year, but there's always a stinker not long after. And that's what makes this team confusing. And part of that has been the bench. I think that there's expectations on the team this year just around the league. I don't think that anybody's coming in Sacramento thinking they have an off night and this is just going to be a breeze and not really playing that hard. Teams know to get up at least a little bit for Sacramento, not playing them like they're Denver or anything, but still, I think there is an aspect of that. And yeah, I mean, that what it comes down to for me is De'Aaron Fox going to be the best player on the floor on any given night? And I think he's good enough to be, but there are some inconsistencies there.
So this is actually a blind spot for me. What are his clutch numbers this year? Because I know that was also a thing that happened last year. Are they similar? Or have they dropped off significantly from what last year was?
They've dropped, but it's not too crazy. But the main thing is that the Kings aren't in that many clutch games this year.
Okay.
It's just way lower volume compared to last year. Do you have a feel on like who even would be leaning towards that award this year? I know DeMar always does his thing.
So DeMar has a case. Macri told me this stat that I was like, oh yeah, that's probably the clutch player this year. I forget who it was, but
I looked the other day.
Regardless, it does also seem like because of what the Celtics are, they're not playing a ton of close games either. The Knicks, I'm going to pull it up now. The expanded standings. I believe they only have like 2 games this year, and they're 3 points less. They're 5 at this point. Going into the All-Star break, remember that call that happened against the Knicks, the Rockets game.
Yeah.
Right. Well, no. So that's the Pistons game where it was the makeup call. Okay. But the Rockets game where Brunson got called for a foul on a half-court heave, right? That was the Knicks' second game of 3 points or less. Now, since the All-Star break, they've played a couple more than that. Obviously, the Pistons game that you're referring to was one like that. But like the Knicks haven't played an overtime game yet this season. So we're at the point where Brunson is like decent clutch numbers, and he's not going to be a consideration because, like you said, the volume, as far as that's concerned. I wonder because they're on pace for about 48 wins, the Kings, and that's what they got last year. And you mentioned that progression not being linear is something fan bases have to deal with. I mean, what was the move or a move that Kings? I know Siakam was rumored to the Kings. I remember Anunoby was rumored to the Kings. Is there a move that from what you've heard, Kings fans are frustrated didn't get made and maybe could have sped up progress in a different way?
There was a lot of talk of Kyle Kuzma this offseason, and I think some people like that idea, and I'm kind of torn on it. He's interesting to me. I still get really hung up on, man, that year in the bubble, he was really playing good defense when he was on the Lakers. Mm-hmm. And so I still hold on to that a little bit and some potential hope there. But yeah, I mean, that Siakam, which it's kind of unclear how much he wanted to be in Sacramento, which obviously is a big question mark there with him being a pending free agent. But that's pretty much the extent of it. I think there's patience in this front office, really, just waiting that they know the next swing they take has to be the right move, pretty much. Because I think it's going to be one where they put a lot of assets on the table. Maybe that's a Lauri Markkanen, maybe that's a Mikal Bridges. Like, names always sound crazy when you just throw them out there, but the NBA changes very fast. So I like to never count anybody off the table. And I think that's kind of the eventual direction. But currently, there's a lot of pressure on Keegan Murray to, I think, do a good bit in this offense. I mean, really, Malik Monk is the number 3
behind
Domas and De'Aaron. I would go De'Aaron. I mean, it really might even be Malik and then Sabonis when it comes to scoring.
Well, yeah, because you like run the offense basically,
right?
With Sabonis as a hub, which makes I have some thoughts about Sabonis in a second, but so I mean, in your expert opinion on Keegan Murray, how has he done in year 2 and potentially taking some kind of leap?
Yeah, there's definitely been defensive progress. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of time on guards, but offensively for sure, I think still some growing pains. There's a little bit more mid-range. He's talked about like looking up to Chris Middleton previously when he first came into the league. And so you start to see little flashes of that a bit here and there, but there are still moments where teams are putting their worst defender on him and he doesn't really go and take advantage of it. And a lot of Sacramento's equal opportunity offense, you kind of have to be aggressive and go get yours. And I think that Keegan is still learning and growing into his ability to really do that. So there are some flashes, but most of the growth this year has been defensively.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the Knicks play against him and whether they. I mean, I think Keegan Murray's better than Isaac Okoro, but the Knicks, when they play the Cavs, are just like, we're going to put Brunson on Okoro and just leave him alone. Like, if Okoro beats us, it's honestly how teams play Josh Hart, where Hart, I think, knows to drive a little bit more so and like tries to get on the run going downhill when you give him space. But that being said, I'm curious. I mean, look, this is a matchup where the Knicks are going to have to. They've gotten away with these last two games with the fact that it's the Sixers who are depleted and the Timberwolves. The Trailblazers who stink. To give you an idea of where the Knicks are coming from, there's obviously the cloud of OG Anunoby being questionable again, but I'm looking for them to get tested in one of these games with Anunoby. They're 14-2 since with him in the lineup since the trade happened. And a good offense like the Kings should be something that they, get a good barometer of how what their defense can do against a team like that. Specifically, Domantas Sabonis. So he's currently averaging 20, 13, and 8 this season. I believe it's 13.6 and 8.4 rebounds, assists per game. For those who don't know, those points, rebounds, assists. For those not keeping score at home of what the
wild numbers, by the way.
So, do you know what the 20, 13, and 8 club is in NBA history? Who else is in it?
Oh man, I don't. Maybe.
So I got the list here. Okay. So you got Wilt. Who else?
I don't even know where to go after that. Giannis?
It's a trick question. Nobody. Like it's literally just Sabonis. It's literally Wilt and Sabonis. So Jokic has the 2012 and 9 club. So like I'm cherry picking a little bit, right. But that's the rare air that Sabonis is mentioned in. Now, because I have no idea how to evaluate him. I know the Bill Simmons pod that just went viral for saying he's one of the worst contracts in the NBA. I'm not there. I'll tell you that much. But I mean, you tell me, like how much. I mean, this is a dumb question to ask. Like, how important he is to the Kings' success? He's obviously important to the Kings' success, but like you see him day in and day out. Like how, like to the Knicks fan that isn't watching the Kings, like what can they expect going into this match of like how much he's going to impact the game, both specifically from the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, the physicality is huge with Sabonis, whether that's in screens or in boxing out. And he's a beast on the boards. He leads the league in rebounding for second consecutive season. And everything is run through him. The dribble handoff game, the passing that, you can definitely tell that he's his dad's son during certain moments. And he makes everybody around him better. And I think that as the Kings even get more talented, that will improve how he looks in the scope of the NBA landscape in general, because like I said, it's just, he empowers all of his other players and specifically looks good with other playmakers. If you get him in a 2-man game with De'Aaron Fox or Malik Monk and they're able to feed him in the short roll and he can make plays from there, Kings have really good shooting around these guys. Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter come flying off these dribble handoffs and shoot movement triples. So really everything is run through Sabonis. And I do think he is a somewhat tough evaluation because there's nights where it's like, God, they are paying you a lot and they could use you to score right now, but you're not one to exactly go get a bucket. But I think that's fine as long as you get the right guys around him, which is still a work in progress. And there are some defensive questions, even if he tries. And I think his defensive rebounding is an underrated aspect of his defense. But there's everything that really on Sacramento's offense is able to run the way it does because of Sabonis. And it's very funny to me that Mike Brown was able to come from Draymond Green where he ran that and then pretty much implement the same thing with Sabonis.
That was my thought when it was like, when you just said about how like there may be moments where we could ask you to get a bucket, but that's not his game. And it's like, yeah, Draymond, like he looks a lot better when he's got Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and honestly Kevin Durant around him. And when he could just kind of be be a hub, something you can run things through, not necessarily run things around, not run things through. I am curious about the defensive limitations that you were hinting at. And like, I know Julius and he have had their battles in the past. Julius has a 46-point game in Sacramento from a couple years ago. He will obviously not be playing in this game, but the Knicks may be able to take advantage of him by going 5 out and having like a perimeter lineup that can take advantage of someone that is that. Now, the interesting thing is when they have Hartenstein, he may not always occupy the dunker spot, but we'll be rolling to it eventually. You mentioned the stinkers that the Kings will have from time to time. Is there a common trend that leads to these stinkers? Is it? I mean, again, this is my uneducated opinion about the Kings. Like, I'm assuming it has something to do with the defensive side of the ball, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think their inconsistencies do come from just being a bad defensive team, right? If you're a team that relies on your offense, sometimes shots aren't going to fall. And that's the nature of the league. And I think the way you find consistency is by playing defense, and the Kings don't do that very well. But it's part of why this year's been so confusing is you try to ask after they have a 20-point loss at home to Portland, or they lose at home to Charlotte or to Detroit this year, one game after beating the Nuggets. Like this team has made very little sense. And it's almost like what Kings fans are expecting to happen right now is they just beat the Bucks and the Lakers. They're like unsure on the Knicks game, but more worried about the Grizzlies on the next schedule because the Kings just play down to the level of their opponents, and it makes no sense. And you try to ask around, and it doesn't seem like the players or coaching staff are very sure, or at least publicly. And it doesn't seem like effort to me. I think it's just that they're not a very good defensive roster.
So you're in the locker room. From last time we talked, you're in the locker room a bunch. So, I mean, from your time interacting with the team and covering the players, like, do they sense that like this is largely the same? I mean, I asked you about the fan base and how their vibes are, but compared to last year, how are they treating this season? Recognizing that they're probably not going to be hosting a playoff series, but we're largely where we were at this point last year.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting aspects, like Kevin Huerter specifically has kind of stood out to me this season. Early this year, they went with Chris Duarte in place of him in the starting lineup for a handful of games, and then went back to him. And currently, I think he's TBD on tonight's game, dealing with a little bit of an injury. But there's been some weird stuff, and I think dealing with expectations is a big part of that. Like I said, nobody's overlooking them. They came into this year with expectations from everybody, from ownership, from the fan base, that I think is definitely playing a part here. But there is a sense of confidence that they have beat the Nuggets. They have swept the Lakers so far this year. I think they're 7-4 against the top 3 teams in the West. The best record of the teams in that sort of 5 to 10 range against the top teams. So there is a sense of optimism that when they're playing at their best, they can compete with really any team.
Well, with that in mind, going into the playoffs this year, and maybe this is a 2-part question, both from a locker room standpoint and from a fan base standpoint, what does a disappointing end to the season look like? And I add the caveat, when I asked you this question last year, you said just make the playoffs. Like a first round exit wouldn't be disappointing because you at least made the playoffs. And I obviously know how we could talk about how the playoffs ended with the Game 7 loss at home. But like, is a disappointing season still losing in the first round this year?
I don't know if that's disappointing. That's kind of my expectation. And I think that's a lot of the fan base's expectation at this point. Now, I don't think they'll be happy with that, but I wouldn't call it disappointing either. I think disappointing is you're in a play-in situation and you don't end up making it through, which I refuse to even give predictions about play-in games because single elimination basketball, who knows what could happen on any given night.
Especially, real quick to cut you off, especially with the teams in the play-in this year.
Right.
The fact that we may end up with Phoenix, Dallas, the Lakers, and the Warriors in there. And if the Kings or the Pelicans fall into that gauntlet where they're just going to have blueprints being up for grabs by the teams that could potentially lose in the play-in, it's something I'd want to avoid,
The amount of stars on those teams is crazy. That's going to be some very entertaining
there's the all NBA teams are going to have like all the guys in the play-in, and yet, may not even make the playoffs. So
right. Yeah. And that's the state of the West, which is what makes it tough. And every single game is extremely impactful at this point. So still fighting to keep your head out of the play-in, really.
Interesting. So the play-in aside, if I had to, maybe you said they're like 7-4 against the top 3 teams, and they're currently at a 6. So, if you want to rank the 3 teams and like least want to see to okay seeing, I guess, in order from the least you want to see the most, which is like weird way to phrase that, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like first round opponent, least you want to see. I'm assuming it's Denver, but maybe you'll surprise me.
Okay. No, it's definitely Denver. The experience is there. And like I mentioned, Sacramento's defense is questionable, and Nikola Jokic will just absolutely pick you apart. The Kings have actually played well against Denver this year. They're 3-1. The most recent game, they got absolutely smacked, though. It wasn't even close. It was like there was a players only meeting after. That's how bad they got beat. And it wasn't. It had all kind of led to that point, but that was the breaking point, I guess, that eventually led to that, which was not long ago. But I do not want anything to do with Denver, and I'm torn with these next ones. I think I would have told you the Clippers like 2 weeks ago, and I still think I want to say them, even though they're struggling. Again, the experience and the size. The Kings do have mismatches that teams can pick on, and I think that's something the Clippers would do really well. They have multiple guys that can kind of exploit that, and I do worry about them. I think the Kings have kind of done okay against Minnesota, and I do have questions about their late game offense. So I'd probably go OKC their third. And they seem like the team that everybody wants to pick of who would we prefer to play in the first round. I get it. They're not proven. SGA is crazy, man. Like every time you turn on the TV, it's like, what is this guy doing now? And they have a well-rounded team around him. So I'd probably go Denver. I'm still putting the Clippers and then OKC. Yeah,
I think the unanimous feedback I get when I go to this question when it comes to the West is like, keep me as far away from Denver as possible and give me Minnesota. And this was honestly before the Towns injury, because there's a version of that team that's not going to score 100 points in a playoff game, and you feel if you can just get to 100 and your defense is solid, which I guess may be a question for the Kings, you have a chance to steal a series without home court.
I don't want to, sorry not to interrupt you, but I don't want to undersell them either, though, because like there's times I watch their games and they have a very deep roster that kind of looks like a championship team sometimes. When Ant is totally rolling, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, just got Monty Morris. Like they have a deep team. Everybody that comes on the floor, you're like, God, now this guy, like they have a very talented roster.
The Naz Reid of it all, when he steps in after Cat goes down, and here's 7 of 11 from 3. Right. Here's 5 more threes the next night. I don't believe in the Ewing theory, partially because it's called the Patrick Ewing theory, but the addition by subtraction of potentially giving Naz Reid those and being able to just run the offense through Ant may be the thing that the Timberwolves benefit from. I still think they would also be fourth on my list in what we're talking about here, which obviously you agree. The Knicks, however, going into this matchup on Saturday night, they've been holding teams under 100 is polite. They held the Blazers to 93, and in the 3 previous games held the Sixers twice. Again, I get it. It's the Sixers twice and the Magic under 80. It was the first time since 2011 that as a franchise, or I guess 2001, that season, that they held 3 straight games of under 80 points. They're leaning on their defense over the last couple of days, especially now that Anunoby's back. The first 2 games, they've found a new level to their defensive identity. Going into this matchup, where the Knicks aren't scoring a ton. They're scoring just barely over 100. How do you think the Kings will fare against the Knicks defense going into this game?
Yeah, I think Anunoby's status is a big question mark here for sure, but the physicality of the Knicks stands out a lot, like it does every single year and every Tom Thibodeau team that's ever existed, really. But the Kings have struggled with that at times. Like the recent losses that come to mind are against Houston and Miami, teams that junk up the game and are super physical. And I think the Knicks can fall in that category. Big question mark every single night for the Kings is how many threes are they going to get to go down? But I think another thing is limiting turnovers. Like a lot of good on-ball defenders, like I mentioned, physical on New York side. And I think that there's a big difference when De'Aaron's taking care of the ball versus when they're turning it over and their transition defense has been bad. I don't think there's very many good transition defenses, but there certainly are bad ones. And I think the Kings definitely fall on the ladder there. So not shooting yourself in the foot offensively just to make it even harder for your already bad defense, I think is definitely big.
That's where the Josh Hart aspect of this game probably comes into play, because he gets his rebounding the last couple games, really since the All-Star break. He's played at least 40 minutes in all but one game, and in that one game he played 39, and he wanted to stay in for a little longer so he can get a 20th rebound. He's got 34 rebounds in his last 2 games, and the moment he gets the defensive rebound, he is looking to push. The pick sixes it really is like a kickoff return is really what it is. Not even a pick six on a steal. Like he gets the ball and just runs it back and scores on his own end. So we'll see if that's something the Knicks can take advantage of in this matchup. I am curious your thoughts on the Knicks. I've asked, just about everybody this, your thoughts on the Knicks since the trade. I'm sure you might agree. Hold on, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. A lot of people, when I ask this question about like what's their ceiling, are like, oh yeah, conference finals. And I'm getting that consensus answer because that's probably right. But like your thoughts on the Knicks and the move they made when it happened, and what they've honestly built the last like 4 years and leading to this roster.
Yeah, it was a little weird watching them be maybe the smartest team at the deadline. To be
confident,
honest.
Right? Yeah,
it was a little weird. I feel like we always talk about the Knicks like they're the big market Kings for the last handful of years, So, yeah, I'm a fan of all the moves that they pulled off. I have been surprised how good Quickly was. That's probably one thing that just not having a close eye on the Knicks, I didn't realize the caliber of player he could be when he got that expanded role. But I think that Anunoby's a guy that's worth it. I'm curious to see what that contract ends up looking like. But it's just a team of so many ideal role players. Like Bogdanovic is just added to that, but I really think Josh Hart and DiVincenzo are just those are the type of guys that I love. And DiVincenzo was in Sacramento for a little while. They could benefit from having a Dante DiVincenzo right now. Just saying. And if you remember, by the way, the last time that the Knicks played in Golden One Center, the Kings actually ended up winning that game, but the Knicks had 23 offensive rebounds with Josh Hart having 15 boards, 8 offensive. Mike Brown came out in postgame pissed off after the win, saying that Josh Hart just kicked their behind and all of this. But I love all the role players they have, and it all fits because you do still have a star in Jalen Brunson, and the leap that he's taken has been ridiculous on both sides of the floor. Davion Mitchell said that that's one of the hardest guys in the league that he's had to guard. Said that in his rookie year last season. So I love what they put together. I've always kind of been a Tibbs guy, even though he's a little bit traditional. I'm a fan for sure. And that comes from being a Jimmy Butler guy. They feel pretty intertwined in a weird way, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the group they put together and the physicality and just traditional way that they managed to have a good offense in the ugliest way possible is weirdly fun to watch.
The possession battle that they're trying to win every night, where it's just like, we may not score on the first try, we the most efficient offense, but damn it if we're not going to try and just eventually score with 3 and 4 chances at the rim. And that's, look, the shout out to Precious Achiuwa, who was really a throw-in in the Toronto trade. And, some injuries happened and he took an opportunity, and like credit to the Knicks for putting him in just a position where it's like, we're not going to call plays for you. You're going to be a roll man. You're going to be in some pick and roll, and you're going to get your points by being an offensive rebound machine. And he took that very basic plan and was like, all right, sure. And there's been some 20-10 games, and we've got people asking us after games, like, did the Knicks just like find a rotation player in like a throw in the Anunoby trade? Now, the funny part with Precious is that they got his bird rights. He's going to be a restricted free agent. I have no idea, like, I don't think they need to game plan like, oh, you can't lose Precious Achua. That's not how this season's going. But he's definitely been an innings eater while Julius has been down, while Mitch has been down, like the perfect backup five and especially defending fives, which is why I'm curious how the Sabonis Achua matchup goes on Saturday night. You mentioned Bogey, and my first question in response to Bogey is do Kings fans have a scapegoat on this team? Someone that every loss is on them, every bad moment watching this team is on them. Who gets the ire of Kings fans the most?
This year, it's been Kevin Huerter, and Harrison Barnes is a close second. Okay. It's really those two, because the core three in the starting lineup is Fox, Sabonis, and Murray. So there's a lot of fingers pointed at the other two and how they can get better. And a lot of like start Malik. So probably Kevin.
Is it, I mean, from your opinion, is it justified the ire that gets directed at both of them?
He struggled, but you know how it is. It gets overblown. I think there's times where it's unfair and yeah, like I said, just kind of scapegoating in a way.
Okay. So I say that because the Knicks scapegoat pattern this year has been, so it started off where it was like a combination of Tibbs and Julius Randle, the first 6 games of the year, was like one of the worst basketball players ever. Like, well, literally the worst start to an NBA season in 20 years. He was shooting 27% from the field after his first 6 games. Eventually turned it around. It was like a justified all-star like after that, which is why he was like having his best season. Then when the trade was made, at that point, like RJ had gotten to a point where his efficiency was, and just really his play was so poor that he was the direction of a lot of people, but there was also like direction at Tibbs and direction at Julius. Like the reason RJ's not doing well is because of Julius being in the way and how Tibbs is using him and why isn't Tibbs playing quickly more minutes and, you know, but plenty of scapegoats to go around. Then the trade was made and there just wasn't a scapegoat for a month because they just didn't lose. And then I think God was the scapegoat for a couple of weeks because they kept getting hurt. Like it was like, oh, Randall goes, well, okay, Jaime Jaquez Jr. was the scapegoat because that's the game that Julius got hurt. It was going after someone on the Miami Heat, and those dirty Miami Heat players injured our player. And Anunoby went down that same game. Isaiah Hartenstein had an Achilles injury. DiVincenzo had a hamstring. Quentin Grimes had a knee, and then Jalen Brunson. We thought the worst that Sunday night against the Cavs. Then they made a trade with Detroit. And while I will admit Bogey on the whole, like his numbers aren't terrible, except unless you look at the rim. Like he has 2 games where he shot really well from 3 and it helped them win 2 games. And honestly, if the whole point of the trade was while your main guys are out, they help you win 2 more games than you would have, that might actually be worth it. But both of them, Bojan Bogdanovic and my God, Alec Burks, what's happened to him? I don't even know if there's a scapegoat case there. I think it's like justified criticism. And Alec Burks played 4 minutes against Portland on Thursday night. I'm not sure he's going to play if Anunoby plays. I'm ready to give Shake Milton a look at this point. And so just giving you a heads up, like, be prepared for the Kings to cook when it comes to, Bogey's in the game. All right, well, we're probably going to outscore the Knicks during this stretch, unless this is the game that he decides that he's going to hit shots. So that's just a bit of what's going on in Knicks land at the moment.
It sounds very, very similar to Kevin Huerter.
Okay, well, there you go.
It's very much where we're at, where teams are targeting him very early in games. It wouldn't surprise me that the couple first possessions, the Kings or the Knicks find a way to get Kevin Huerter switched on to Jalen Brunson. You know, I think that they're going to try to do that for sure. Or OG Anunoby's out there. You try to do the same thing, even on Keegan at times. Like I said, Keegan's made progress, but I think sometimes posting up and some physicality, OG could be somebody that maybe could give him troubles. Like if Julius happened to have been out there, that's not a guy that Keegan would be good on, for example. So sounds very, very similar to Kevin, and teams are going at him. And it doesn't really make sense to me because he's 6'7" and he tries hard. He's just not a very good defender. And it's gotten to the point where, like I said, teams are targeting him. And my theory is that started post All-Star break. And as you're preparing to go against, say, Knicks are coming into town, they're going to watch the last few Kings games and see at the beginning of games, oh, teams are going at Kevin Huerter. We should probably do the same. And once it started, it's just continued to snowball, really.
So explain the Barnes thing, because again, just sight unseen, because I don't watch the Kings a ton. I see 40% shooting from three. His on off. Well, his on off is actually pretty awful, but this is the veteran on the team. Is it just that someone else should be playing over him?
No, it's just this is what he does every year. Is that you look at his stats and you're like, what? How is this guy? He's so efficient. He has the great numbers every single season, and he isn't exactly like a pillar of consistency. Actually, when it comes to games, you don't know what you're getting on a game to game basis. Really, it's kind of quarter to quarter, and I really and the entire Sacramento Kings team really is so far this season. That's the level of inconsistency that we've gotten to with the whole squad. But I feel like it's a pretty successful night for Harrison if you have one good quarter where he has 10, 11 points. And, that might even be a little high. But there's a lot of inconsistencies. The defense, some nights it's all right. He puts up a fight. He's still the guy you're going to put on LeBron, but you definitely don't love that. And getting through screens can be a mess.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll see. The Knicks, it's really one guy that not necessarily that you have to stop, because obviously you stop Jalen Brunson, you're going to have a recipe for success, but they've been running a lot of off ball movement, the sets that they've been running, these honestly, with what we saw work a lot were these ghost screens with Bogey. They're getting Jalen some off-ball movement to get him open for threes. DiVincenzo, it's reminiscent of Rip Hamilton in the 90s. Just we're going to run you off of so many screens so that way eventually you're wide open on the wing. I'm curious if you're telling me that Kevin Huerter is a target, and now Keegan Murray, maybe that's just it's a simple pick and switch, to a guard to guard screen, to get Keegan off of Jalen Brunson. It's an interesting matchup on Saturday night. Two teams that absolutely need to win, that's for sure, in two close playoff races. Last question before I let you get out of here. I've been asking everybody this season because I want to get an idea if other fan bases take rivalries as too intense as Knicks fans do. So the Mount Rushmore of rivals, the four teams that historically or just personally you look forward to most playing on the NBA schedule.
Yeah, first one definitely has to be the Lakers.
I think
there's 0-1, that whole playoff series that Kings fans are still salty about. They still got Doug Christie on the staff.
0-1 or 0-2? 0-1 or 0-2?
0-1.
It was 0-2. It was 0-2 because it was the conference finals, right?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it was conference finals. I want to say it was 0-1, but it might have been 0-2. It's somewhere in there. Yeah, there's still a lot of bad blood there for sure. Doug Christie's still on the coaching staff. Mike Bibby's still on the broadcast.
Oh, wow.
So there's still some guys around a little bit.
Does that go to them too? Did they also hate the Lakers?
Yeah. There's
okay. So it's still ingrained in them.
Barbosa is on the staff, and he wasn't a King, but I think there is an aspect of a little bit of that. Spending a long time with the Warriors, and that's a good transition into the Warriors are definitely the second team. And Mike Brown plays a part of that. Vivek Ranadive, owner of the team, used to be a minority owner of the Warriors. And there's definitely a lot of moments where you feel like he's kind of trying to mock their success or their route to success, I should say. And you see it a lot with, we mentioned earlier, the Sabonis and Draymond offense, or bringing over Mike Brown. And even you want to look at Harrison Barnes or JaVale McGee. There's definitely some similarities there. And the way the playoffs ended last year adds some saltiness. And there's kind of a handful of young Warrior fans out here that I think could have been Kings fans if there wasn't an entire generation's worth of horrible Kings teams while the modern day Bulls were right next door. So yeah, there's definitely an interesting dynamic there.
When I was talking to Sam over at the Light Years pod, I compared him to the Patriots, where it's this is largely off the back of one player, but we'll see what happens when one player is gone. And, the generation of fans proximity wise that there were people in Connecticut or portions of New England that were like, all right, I'm a Jets fan, I'm a Giants fan, and then suddenly the Patriots just became the team to root for in the Northeast for a while. I assumed proximity wise, the Warriors would end up on this list,
Yeah, they definitely have to. It's a 2-hour drive, After that, though, to be honest, I don't really know. It kind of ends there. I would still throw the Pacers on there, but that's a modern thing.
Because
but I think trade. That they will be intertwined for Halliburton's entire career because of that. And everybody's like, oh, when is this conversation going to stop? I don't think it ever will, to be honest. And
real quick to the Knicks fan that doesn't get to hear the conversation, how does it go? Is it like we're fine, what's a bonus, or is it like we could have had Halliburton?
Yeah, from a Kings fan standpoint, it is fine. Like they spent 16 years out of the postseason, and that got them to the state that they're at now, and there's still hope that they can take that next jump. They didn't send any picks in that deal. They actually got a couple second rounds back, but they still have all their treasure chest of assets to go to make another swing that I think will determine the long-term success of the deal. But as of right now, it gets talked about as a win-win trade from pretty much everybody. It feels like even like LeBron gets asked about it the other day and he didn't want to declare a winner, so that's fine right now. I do worry that down the line in 5 years, is that still going to be how this is perceived when Tyrese spends his entire career in Indiana, and you never know if that ends up being the case, but that it's typically talked about as a win-win. But, some people that still love Tyrese and take those moments to express it when Domas has a tough game.
Yeah.
But after that, I really don't know where to go, to be honest. There's nobody else that I think really comes to mind that does it like that. I mean, weirdly, like the Supersonics, because the Kings almost moved to Seattle, and we're going to become the Supersonics.
Yeah.
So I don't. Maybe I'll throw the Supersonics in there.
The Sonics, wow!
Just because they were almost became the Sonics.
So if the Sonics, if they expand to 2 more teams, immediate rival, the Sacramento Kings. There you go.
Yeah, I'll be interested. Maybe.
There you go.
Maybe. There's one time James Johnson got traded to the Kings right as that was happening and wore a Sonics hat, and he'll get booed in Sacramento to this day.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's that. I mean, I actually appreciate that. That's how much the Kings mean to the local people there.
Yeah.
It's like that. So there's no Clippers, there's no other LA, there's no other California teams. I guess we named all of them at this point.
Yeah, I mean, try to think about the Suns. I mean, definitely the division teams hold more weight, the Clippers and the Suns for sure, along with the Lakers and Warriors that were mentioned. But I feel like all those teams kind of sucked at the same time for a good stretch, really.
What about De'Aaron Fox has had his Twitter battles with the Knicks, where he laughed at them because they dropped in the lottery again. Can the Knicks find their way into a rivalry with the Kings? Yeah,
it would probably take some sort of altercation. You know what I mean?
A stretch is what you're saying.
Yeah. And, there's the Dante DiVincenzo aspect. Could he maybe be talking to someone?
We got Anunoby after years of Anunoby rumored to the Kings.
That might be something. Yeah.
The movie How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. That's the finals in that movie is Kings Knicks.
Really?
Yes. It's very weird, the storyline in that movie. It's daytime. I have to go to the finals. It's the game's at night, probably. All it took was one person to hand it to a sports fan, the script to a sports fan. You'd be like, oh, this scene should take place at night, not in the middle of a workday. But regardless, you mentioned that it's interesting to see the Knicks be competent all of a sudden. I grew up, my first memories of basketball were that Chris Webber, originally J. Will team, the Jason Williams teams. And then you get Mike Bibby, Bobby Jackson, Doug Christie, Vladi, obviously, Peja, my goodness. I mean, a lot of kids on the playground were screaming Kobe when they would take threes, and some of us were screaming Peja when we were taking threes. So it's good for me too, for nostalgia purposes, to see the Kings be in the thick of a playoff race as well. So, we'll see what happens in this matchup on Saturday night. Brenden, as always, it's good to chat with you about your basketball team and just about basketball in general. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and all of your stuff.
Yeah, definitely Kings Pulse Podcast and sacktownsports.com for any sort of written stuff. Appreciate you as always, Andrew.
Of course. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. And if you dig the show, head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like this video. Remember to subscribe. I will be back on Monday morning with a brand new edition of this show, previewing the matchup against the who are they playing? Oh, the Golden State Warriors. That's right. The team that the Kings hate. I'm not surprised with it being that close to Sacramento. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll speak with you soon. Peace.